The story begins in the picturesque coastal city of Nabeul, Tunisia, a place once celebrated as the City of Jasmine, where the scent of orange blossoms filled the air and the Mediterranean waves whispered peace to the shore. But in the late 1980s, specifically between 1987 and 1990, this tranquility was shattered by a darkness that no one could have predicted. A nameless shadow began to slip through the citrus groves and narrow alleys, snatching away the city's innocence and leaving behind a trail of grief that would haunt the nation for decades. No one imagined that behind these horrific crimes stood a broken, middle-aged man named Naceur Damergi, a man who wasn't born a monster, but was forged by the fires of neglect, social rejection, and a deep-seated hatred for a world that never wanted him. Naceur Damergi was born into a complex social reality. He was an illegitimate child in a society that at the time offered no mercy for such a status. From his very first breath, he was an outcast, treated with contempt and cruelty by almost everyone he encountered. He grew up in the cracks of society, enduring physical abuse, deep poverty, and a psychological isolation that carved a dark abyss within his soul. Over the decades, his sadness curdled into a venomous rage, not against those who hurt him, but against the very concept of innocence that he had been denied. To Damergi, the happy children of Nabeul, with their clean clothes and loving families, represented everything he would never have. This envy didn't just burn, it became a hunger. He began his reign of terror by prowling the markets and public squares of Nabeul. He wasn't a man who looked like a villain. He looked like a weary laborer, someone invisible to the busy crowds. This was his greatest weapon. He would observe children playing alone, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Using a deceptive kindness, he would approach them with promises of candy, small wooden toys, or a few coins for help with a simple chore. Once he had gained their trust, he would lead them away from the safety of the city lights and into the dense, suffocating silence of the Sidi Daher forest, or the vast orange orchards that ringed the town. In the heart of those woods, the kind man would vanish, and the butcher would emerge. Damergi didn't kill for profit or passion. He killed to feel a momentary release from his internal torment. He would strangle his young victims with cold, calculated precision, watching the light fade from their eyes as if he were extinguishing his own painful memories through them. He would then bury their small bodies in shallow graves, hidden beneath a thick underbrush and rotting citrus fruit, before returning to his shack to live among his neighbors as if nothing had happened. Sometimes he would even sit in local cafes, listening to the panicked whispers of parents and the updates on the news, wearing a hidden yellow smile of satisfaction. As the vanishings increased, a paralyzing fear gripped Nabeul. Mothers stopped letting their children out of their sight. Schools were guarded, and the once vibrant streets became ghost towns after sunset. Rumors of ghouls or supernatural spirits spread through the neighborhoods because the police could find no physical evidence, no witnesses, and no motive. The Tunisian security forces were under immense pressure, but Damergi was a ghost. He had no criminal record, no stable home, and he moved through the orchards like a predator who knew every leaf and stone. In November 1990, the nightmare finally reached its end. A police patrol spotted a man matching the description, lurking near a bus station, attempting to strike up a conversation with a lone child. When they approached, the man panicked, his composure crumbling instantly. Upon searching his meager dwelling, investigators were horrified to find what could only be described as a museum of death. Small shoes, torn pieces of clothing, and cheap toys that he had kept as trophies from his victims. In the interrogation room, the silence was brief. Once confronted with the evidence, Naceur Damergi didn't just confess, he poured out his crimes with a chilling lack of remorse. He spoke of the 14 murders as if he were reading a grocery list, famously telling the investigators, "I felt a sense of relief after every operation, as if a heavy burden was being lifted from my chest." The most harrowing part of the investigation followed. Damergi was taken back to the forests to point out the burial sites. It was a scene of biblical tragedy. Hundreds of townspeople gathered behind police lines, and as each small body was unearthed from the dirt, screams of agony echoed through the trees. The Butcher of Nabeul had claimed 14 confirmed lives, though many feared the true count was higher. His trial in 1991 became the trial of the century in Tunisia. While his defense tried to argue that his traumatic childhood made him a victim of a split personality, medical experts ruled that he was perfectly sane, highly calculated, and fully aware of the evil he had committed. The verdict was swift: death by firing squad. At dawn, January 24, 1991, Naceur Damergi was taken to the execution grounds. Eyewitnesses claimed that the man who had shown no mercy to children was trembling uncontrollably in his final moments. His execution marked the last time the death penalty was actually carried out in Tunisia, closing the door on one of the darkest chapters in Arab criminal history. Today, the city of Nabeul has regained its peace, but the Sidi Daher forest remains a silent monument to the children who never came home, and a haunting reminder of how a society's neglect can sometimes breathe life into a monster.